I stood there, numb and alone, my hands frozen around the steering wheel as the cold night air crept in. The glow of the pharmacy sign flickered above me, mocking my desperation. Just 5 minutes, she had promised. But 25 minutes passed, and the silence swallowed me whole. When they finally returned, no apology, just an empty excuse. After everything I'd done for them, this was how I was treated. So I took control, starting with their money. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The cold crept in like a betrayal. Joyce Penner sat in the back seat of Brittany's white SUV, her knees stiff beneath a wool skirt that no longer felt suited for the night. The pharmacy's neon sign blinked above the parking lot like a warning. Open 24 hours. Its hum swallowed by the silence around her. She rubbed her gloved hands together, but the warmth had long since fled. They'd said 5 minutes. Brittany had barely turned in her seat before chirping. Just running in for Cassie's meds. Be right back. That was 25 minutes ago, maybe 30. Joyce's breath clouded in front of her, disappearing against the glass. She tried the door handle. Locked. She leaned forward, checking the front. No keys in the ignition, no heat, just silence. Her flip phone, wedged in the side pocket of her handbag, blinked low battery. She pressed redial, voicemail, tried again. Nothing. The inside of the car smelled faintly of cinnamon air freshener and cheap leather. Her hip ached against the cold vinyl seat. Outside, the lot was empty except for a teenage boy on a bike circling the building in slow loops. He never looked her way. She leaned forward again, cupping her hands near her mouth. Brittany, her voice fogged the window. No response. She couldn't even see their silhouettes inside the store anymore. Just her own reflection, pale, pinched, wrapped in a too-thin winter coat with a collar that wouldn't stay up. She adjusted her scarf again. Her fingers were trembling now. Sharp, angry needles danced in her knuckles. She counted backwards from 30, then again. The teenager vanished behind the building. A gust of wind stirred a styrofoam cup across the asphalt. Her stomach clenched, the ache of it hollow and cold. Not hunger, not fear, something worse. Something quiet. Headlights flashed across the lot. For a second, she hoped it was someone else. A stranger who might knock on the window, ask if she was all right, but it wasn't. It was the SUV's own lights, blinking twice. The locks clicked. She barely managed to lift her hand before the door opened. Brittany appeared, coat zipped to her chin, cheeks flushed. "Oh my God, we thought you were asleep," she said, all brightness and no apology. "You should have called." Joyce opened her mouth, closed it. The warmth from inside the store clung to Brittany like perfume. Travis followed behind her, already typing on his phone. "Don't make a thing," he muttered. In the quiet ride home, Brittany turned the heat up, just one tick, and hummed to the radio. Travis scrolled. No one looked back. Joyce waited until they pulled into the driveway of the duplex. Her half of the house was dark. She hadn't left the porch light on, not thinking she'd be home this late. Her feet hit the pavement with a dull thud. The frost-crusted lawn crunched underfoot as she crossed to her door. Inside, the house exhaled silence. She flipped on a lamp. Its yellow glow spread thinly over the room. She unwound her scarf with numb fingers, every motion stiff. The warmth hadn't followed her home. She sat at the small table by the kitchen window, pulled open her planner, and wrote in small, deliberate letters, Monday, 12:04 a.m., 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Locked in SUV, 29 minutes. No heat, no answer. She circled it once in black ink. Then she turned to a fresh page, titled it, January, Incidents. She rose and shuffled toward the bedroom, shoulders aching. Her coat resisted as she pulled it down over her arms. One sleeve caught on her wrist. She tugged, then paused. Her fingertips had gone white, stiff. The zipper caught halfway. She gave it another tug. Nothing. Her hand fell to her side. And for the first time in weeks, Joyce realized she wasn't cold from age. She was cold because they wanted her to be. The fluorescent lights above the urgent care intake desk buzzed like hornets. Joyce sat hunched in a plastic chair, coat draped over her knees, skin blotched a pale lavender. Her fingers were still slow to move. A nurse in lavender scrubs tapped at a keyboard, not once looking up. She left her coat at home, Travis said, too loudly, like someone playing a part in a drama he didn't rehearse for. His arm was slung over the back of Brittany's chair, but his body leaned away from both women. Joyce blinked slowly. She had never once gone anywhere in the winter without her coat. Not when raising Travis. Not when it dipped into the 30s like last night. Brittany nodded with her arms crossed, her voice soft and rehearsed. We didn't realize how cold it got in the car. She said she was fine when we got back. Then, with a glance toward the nurse, we just can't keep up with all her needs anymore. It's been a lot. Joyce didn't speak. She wasn't sure she'd be heard, even if she did. The nurse finally clicked enter, turned, and nodded. We'll get her vitals and bring her back in just a minute. Inside the exam room, the air was dry and stale. The doctor, a wiry man in his 50s, with breath that smelled faintly of black coffee, examined Joyce's hands, shined a penlight in her eyes, and said something about mild hypothermia. Nothing emergent, he added. But I'm concerned about the early signs of cognitive fog. Has she seemed off recently? She's been forgetful, Brittany answered before anyone asked her. Misplacing things, repeating herself. Joyce tilted her head slightly, then nodded. Just once. She kept her lips pressed in a thin line, not out of agreement, but discipline. On the ride home, she sat silent while Travis cursed about the paperwork, and Brittany scrolled on her phone, loudly reading an email about HOA meeting dates. Neither of them asked how she felt. Back at the duplex, Brittany dropped the urgent care discharge papers on the kitchen counter like a receipt she didn't want. It says to monitor her overnight, but I mean... She waved a hand, vaguely toward the hallway. If she's up and moving, she's fine, right? Travis was already halfway to the door. I've got an early call. You good? Joyce nodded again, just once. Enough to clear them out. As soon as the door closed, she reached for the paper and folded it carefully, slipping it into the red-covered notebook she kept tucked beneath the napkin drawer. She had already dated the page. Tuesday. 10:38 a.m. Diagnosis: mild hypothermia. Noted cognitive fog. There was a small ink blot on the edge of the page, but the words remained sharp. She took a cup of chamomile from the stovetop and stepped out to her small porch. A crisp wind rustled the dying lavender plant in its pot. From next door, Doreen Hill appeared, cardigan flapping, her sharp eyes narrowing behind gold-rimmed glasses. You look like you got scraped by winter, Doreen said. Joyce managed a smile. Urgent care says I'm lucky. Doreen nodded once. Then her eyes dropped to Joyce's wrist, a thin purple ring of skin where her coat cuff had rubbed against cold flesh. That's from more than luck. She paused. Want me to start a file? Joyce took a slow sip of tea, let the steam rise around her face, and nodded. Start one. Inside later, she sat down at her desk and opened her bank account on the ancient laptop Travis always said was on its last leg. She wasn't looking for trouble, just habit. A morning check. There it was. A debit card charge, $214.37, listed from the night before. Not the pharmacy, not groceries, no receipt left behind. Her breath caught, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she clicked print, folded the statement neatly, and slid it into a new section in the red notebook. Labeled it unauthorized transactions. Then she underlined the date 3 times. Joyce laid the receipts out on the kitchen table like evidence at trial. Each creased slip held beneath a cold paperweight of suspicion. Her red notebook sat open beside them, the number $214.37 underlined in careful pen strokes. She checked grocery receipts, gas station charges, Even the pharmacy log from the night Brittany left her freezing in the SUV, nothing matched. She tilted her head, the overhead light catching the glint of her glasses. The charge had posted just past midnight. She'd still been shivering in the backseat of the car. When Travis came in that afternoon, chewing loudly on a protein bar, she didn't greet him. She didn't need to. "I need to ask about a charge on my account," she said. Voice calm but taut. $214. It wasn't me. He didn't break stride, tossing his keys onto the counter. "Groceries, maybe. You eat, don't you?" She watched him open the fridge and swig from a jug of orange juice. "Not that much. Not without a receipt." He shrugged and dropped into a chair. "You want to micromanage milk and eggs now?" Brittany swept in behind him a moment later, cheeks rosy from the outside chill, her arms full with a large box. A new space heater, glossy white, still in shrink wrap. She barely looked at Joyce as she passed, setting it down by the baseboard in their half of the duplex. "This old place is drafty," she said cheerfully. "Travis said the power bill's nuts. I figured I'd warm things up." Joyce glanced at the heater, then back at her notebook. No receipt, no mention. Just an assumption, her money, their comfort. After they left to pick up Cassie from school, Joyce moved with purpose. She logged into her bank portal and clicked freeze card. Then she turned a fresh page in a brand new notebook, this one with a navy blue cover. She titled it in all caps, Winter Theft. She made 3 columns: date, amount, suspected use. First entry, January 3rd, $214.37. Brittany's heater? By dusk, Doreen was already on her porch, with a plastic tub of white bean chili and a knitted cap pulled low over her ears. "They spent $200 a mine," Joyce said, her voice thin but unshaken. "Claimed it was food." Doreen handed over the chili. "We'll add it to the file, but listen." She looked pointedly at the navy notebook. "You need more than ink and spite. You need a lawyer." Joyce gave a tight nod. "I've been thinking about someone. Tobias Grant. He spoke at that senior fair last fall, financial abuse seminar." "Get him," Doreen said flatly. "And don't wait." Joyce didn't. That evening, she sat at her desk and drafted a message to Tobias's office, her fingers still stiff from the cold days before. She didn't mention everything yet, just enough to draw attention. Subject line, urgent. Possible misuse of funds by family. She hit send, then leaned back in her chair, the old wood creaking beneath her. She'd just finished logging another line, 1/3. No grocery receipts found, when a soft knock came at the back door. Cassie stood there, hoodie drawn up, sneakers muddied. She didn't say a word at first. Her hand dipped into her coat pocket, then extended something, a small square photograph. Joyce took it slowly. A timestamp in the corner. 1/3, 12:12 a.m. It showed Brittany at a salon counter, her blonde hair damp, a stylist behind her. In her hand, unmistakably, was Joyce's debit card. The red one with the faded corner. The same one now frozen. Cassie's eyes searched hers. "She doesn't know I took it," she whispered. Joyce folded the photo, not with anger, but with precision. "Neither does the bank," she said softly. "Not yet." The envelope was pale blue, official, thin, and too light to carry good news. Joyce plucked it from the mailbox and paused on the porch as the morning fog rolled through Visalia's quiet suburb like a slow leak. Her name was typed neatly on the front, but it was what she found inside that made her jaw tighten. Bank correspondence addressed to Brittany Penner, tied to her account. Inside the duplex, she waited at the threshold while Brittany reheated leftover pasta in the microwave. The hum filled the room with a low, mechanical rhythm. Joyce held the letter out. "This came today," she said evenly. "For you, from my bank." Brittany glanced over, eyebrows lifting. "Oh, that," she said, brushing crumbs from the counter. "I consolidated our accounts. For simplicity. Less stress on you." "For whose simplicity?" Joyce asked. Her voice wasn't raised, but it had weight now. steel braided into soft vowels. Brittany smiled like a woman pitching a favor. You gave me access last spring, remember? That proxy form. It just made sense to streamline things. Don't worry, I'm keeping track. Joyce's stomach turned. She had signed a temporary authorization form after her minor surgery last April, so Travis could pay her medical bill. Temporary, one time. That form had not included consolidation. Later that afternoon, she sat across from Tobias Grant in his quiet office near Mooney Boulevard. The blinds were half closed, and the air smelled of oiled leather and printer toner. Tobias, salt and pepper hair cropped close and tie precisely knotted, studied the photocopied letter in his hand. She consolidated your accounts without your explicit consent, he asked, tone measured but sharp. Joyce nodded once. I didn't authorize permanent access, just one payment. In April, he tapped his pen against the letter, thoughtful. This crosses the line into unauthorized control of a protected account. Proxy forms don't grant carte blanche access. This may fall under financial elder abuse, especially if she's moving your funds. She already is, Joyce said quietly. There was a salon charge 2 nights ago, and she bought a space heater. Out of your account? Tobias asked. Joyce handed him the photo Cassie had given her, and Tobias studied it for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We'll build this carefully, he said. Paper, dates, proof, start logging everything. I already have, Joyce said. She reached into her purse and pulled out the red and navy notebooks. Tobias smiled faintly. Perfect. Don't stop. That evening, Joyce sat on the edge of her bed, ankles wrapped in thick socks, eyes burning from exhaustion and quiet rage. She held her phone in one hand and downloaded a financial tracker app Doreen had recommended. It let her monitor account activity in real time, even transactions Brittany might try to disguise. As the app loaded, she heard the clinking of dinner plates from the other side of the duplex wall. Brittany's laughter floated faintly through the drywall, a sharp contrast to the silence on Joyce's side. Moments later, there was a soft knock at her door. Doreen entered, carrying a plastic folder and a mug of chamomile tea. I found your old statements, she said, patting the folder. Fireproof box under your dresser, labeled like a government archive. Joyce's eyes brightened. I was afraid they were gone. You're smarter than they think, Doreen replied, setting down the tea. Let's keep it that way. They sorted the statements by date and cross-referenced every major charge. Patterns emerged: Brittany's purchases, Travis's gas refills, even a few odd Amazon orders Joyce never made, candles and athletic wear. Before bed, Joyce checked the financial tracker again. No new charges, not yet. She set her phone on the nightstand and let her fingers rest on the comforter, breathing in the faint scent of lavender detergent. Then came the knock. Travis stood in the doorway, his voice casual. Hey, Mom, did you forget to pay the utilities? Got a shut-off notice today. Joyce stared at him. I haven't missed a bill in 30 years. He scratched his neck, not meeting her eyes. Well, they're saying otherwise. You might want to look into it. After he left, Joyce walked to her desk and checked the file. Her last check for PG&E had cleared 2 weeks ago. She pulled up the tracking app, and her face went still. No payments had gone out for gas, electric, or water in the last billing cycle. Brittany had skipped them, and the house was about to go cold. Again, the bank lobby smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and quiet power. Joyce walked in beside Tobias, her spine straight, her hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. She carried 2 folders, one red, one navy, and didn't smile at the teller who greeted them. This wasn't a friendly visit. Ready? Tobias asked, voice low. Joyce nodded once. Let's begin. In a private office behind the glass partition, Tobias slid his business card across the desk to the branch manager. This is a financial elder abuse case in progress. We're initiating full withdrawal from Mrs. Penner's current checking and savings accounts. Immediate rerouting of all income streams to new, secure accounts. Social Security, pension, dividends, everything. The manager, young, polite, a little too cheery, blinked. Understood. We'll start the transfer. And the remaining. Balance? Joyce leaned in. Leave $1. The manager hesitated. Ma'am? $1, Joyce repeated. Let them notice the difference, not the departure. Tobias cracked the faintest grin. That's the plan. Within 30 minutes, Joyce had a new checking account, a separate savings account, and a new debit card registered in only her name. The old joint account was rendered inert, technically open, but stripped of function. All automatic deposits were rerouted. Pension, Social Security, utility autopays were migrated to the new card, each line double-checked by Tobias himself. As they left, Tobias handed her an envelope. Print copies of everything. You're building your firewall. Paper matters more than memory. Joyce tucked it into her purse like a weapon. That afternoon she sat with Doreen at her kitchen table, a notary form between them and the faint hiss of a kettle warming in the background. Outside, the fog hung low across the lawn like a held breath. Doreen examined the form. Revocation of power of attorney, signed and dated. This should have been done months ago. I wasn't cold enough yet, Joyce said flatly. Now I am. Once signed, notarized, and filed, Joyce scanned the document to her new legal folder, stored both digitally and in print. The revocation included Travis, Brittany, and any associated medical or financial agents. Nobody but her, and Tobias, as legal backup, had access now. Later that night, she handed Cassie a small sealed box wrapped in brown paper. They sat on the edge of Joyce's bed, quiet except for the low hum of the new space heater Doreen had brought over. What's this? Cassie asked, tilting her head. A phone, prepaid, only one number in it. Mine. Cassie blinked. You trust me with this. Joyce placed a hand gently over hers. I trust you to know when to use it, and when not to. Cassie's fingers curled around the box. She didn't say thank you, but her eyes did. The next morning, the call came. Joyce had just poured her second cup of coffee when Brittany's voice rang out through the thin drywall. High-pitched, brittle, panicked. Travis, your card isn't going through. From the kitchen window, Joyce could see Brittany standing in the driveway, phone in one hand, the other gesturing wildly. Travis was pacing beside her truck, half-shaven, a receipt fluttering in the wind. I just checked the balance yesterday, he barked. Try it again, Brittany snapped. Joyce lifted her mug, sipped quietly, and watched the scene unfold like a slow-motion comedy. Across the way, Doreen stepped onto her porch, arms crossed, watching too. Travis climbed into his truck, slammed the door, and tried again. Engine off, card out, inserted, declined. He cursed loud enough to echo down the block. I need that damn generator. I already promised Brian I'd bring it today. Brittany stomped a foot. What happened to the joint account? Joyce returned to her kitchen table, opened her financial tracker app, and refreshed the screen. No activity, no access, no problem. Outside, Travis kicked the tire hard enough to startle a cat beneath the car. Inside, Joyce wrote a fresh heading in her red notebook. 5- account separation executed. Then she added a note underneath. They don't know it yet, but the storm already hit. Travis didn't knock. He shoved open the connecting door between the duplex halves so hard it rattled the picture frames on Joyce's side. What the hell did you do? Joyce didn't look up right away. She was seated at her small kitchen table, flipping through her utility paperwork, a cup of chamomile steaming beside her. The financial tracker app glowed softly on her phone screen. Electric, water, and gas, all paid, all current, all in her name. I did, she said evenly, what I should have done months ago. Travis's face flushed red, jaw tight. You froze the accounts. You changed the deposits. You reclaimed my money, Joyce said. She finally looked up at him, her voice firm. Don't mistake quiet for weak, Travis. That was your first mistake. Before he could respond, Brittany barged in behind him. phone clutched in one manicured hand. Her lips curled into a practiced pout. "Joyce," she said, sweet but sharp. "This isn't the way families handle things. We've always been here for you." "Have you?" Joyce asked. She stood slowly, carefully, never raising her voice. "Because the last time I needed help, I was locked in a freezing SUV while you bought yourself a salon treatment and a new heater." "That's not fair," Brittany snapped. "We were overwhelmed. You've been slipping, and we've had to step in." Joyce held up the printed medical report from her last visit. Stamped, signed, and dated. Cognitive health. Excellent. She handed it to Brittany without a word. There was a moment of silence. Travis looked away. Joyce walked to the hallway and pressed a code into a brand new digital lock panel installed on the interior side of the duplex's connecting door. The lock blinked green, then red. Secured. "No more shared doors," she said. "If you want to talk, you can call. If I answer, we'll talk." "You can't just cut us off," Travis growled. "I already did," Joyce replied. That afternoon, Tobias met her at the county clerk's office to file a notarized statement of financial independence. His pen scratched calmly over the final line before sliding it across the desk to her. "This makes it clear," he said. "Legally and financially, you are a fully independent party. Any further access without consent is fraud." Joyce signed it. No hesitation. Back home, Doreen was waiting with a zippered folder under one arm and a to-go coffee in the other. "All your utilities are now in your name," Doreen said, flipping through documents like a seasoned auditor. "New account numbers, new passwords. They can't touch it." Joyce nodded, folding each form into her binder labeled Post-Freeze Control. Her hand lingered on the cover before zipping it shut. By sundown, her side of the duplex glowed warm with quiet control. The digital lock beeped softly every time she passed it. A mechanical reminder. This side was hers now. No uninvited footsteps. No financial ambushes. Cassie knocked gently around 7. She stepped in without her usual headphones, eyes flicking nervously to the kitchen, then back to Joyce. "They're mad," she whispered. "I expected that." "No, I mean, they're really mad. Brittany's been looking up assisted living homes, like the ones with the locked doors. Dad said if they can't reason with you, they'll have to push harder." Joyce's breath stilled. She glanced toward the hallway, then to Cassie. "Did they say it in front of you?" "They didn't know I was listening," Cassie said, voice low. "But they meant it." Joyce didn't speak. She walked to her bedroom, pulled out a leather folder Tobias had given her, and opened the tab labeled Protective Actions. Her fingers moved deliberately across the page. It was time for another layer of protection. If they wanted to lock her away, they'd have to break in first. Joyce didn't mean to overhear, but Brittany's voice wasn't the type to stay quiet, especially when scheming. "She can't stay here forever," Brittany was saying through the shared wall, her tone sharp as a nail file. "Once she's in care, we can rent her half. Put in new flooring, maybe list it furnished. That could bring in 1,000 a month easy." Joyce stood frozen in her kitchen, one hand hovering over the kettle. The teabag trembled slightly between her fingers. Through the vent above the stove, she could hear Travis's reply. "I found a couple of low-cost facilities down near Tulare," he said. "One of them even offers memory care. They've got locked units. That'd keep her from wandering if things get worse." Brittany laughed, quick and breathless. "God, don't tempt me." Joyce placed the kettle down. Carefully, quietly. The burner ticked off. She didn't storm next door. She didn't yell or cry. Instead, she opened her red notebook, turned to a fresh page, and wrote 1/11. Discussing facility placement without consent. Financial motivation mentioned. Rental income. At 9 a.m. sharp the next morning, she sat upright in Dr. Caldwell's examination room. The same physician she'd seen for over a decade. The walls smelled faintly of antiseptic and fresh paper sheets. Joyce brought a typed letter outlining the situation and requested a full cognitive and physical evaluation. No guessing, no assumptions. Dr. Caldwell nodded. "We'll run the full panel, Joyce. I'll also include a formal mental status exam. The test took nearly 2 hours. Memory recall, balance checks, executive function tasks, vocabulary, reaction speed. At the end of it, Dr. Caldwell reviewed the results in front of her, flipping through pages with quiet assurance. Well, he said, tapping the folder, this is about as sharp as I've seen in someone your age, or 20 years younger. You've got no signs of dementia, no functional decline, and no limitations requiring assisted care. I'll draft the statement myself. Joyce folded the paper as if it were gold. Tobias had been expecting her. In his office, she slid the medical summary across the desk. They're trying to move me out to free up property. We both know what that is. Tobias didn't blink. It's premeditated elder exploitation. He opened a new folder. I'm filing a preemptive elder abuse protection notice. It won't stop them from talking, but it'll make damn sure they know the law's watching. We'll put it on record before they try anything formal. Joyce watched the form take shape, each field filled in with her information, her property details, and the confirmed medical statement. Tobias wrote with quiet precision, only pausing once to look up. I assume they're unaware you've had an evaluation. They're also unaware I still own the duplex outright, she replied. A small, satisfied smile crossed Tobias's face. Let's keep it that way, at least for now. When she got home, Doreen was already waiting on her porch, bundled in a gray peacoat with a cup of gas station coffee steaming in her hand. I printed 5 copies, Doreen said. Certified mail's better than hand delivery for people like them. They respect paperwork when it wears a postal badge. Joyce handed her 2 envelopes, stamped and sealed. Send it today. I want the shock to arrive with lunch. It did. At 12:42 p.m., the delivery truck rolled up. Brittany, hair in hot rollers and barefoot on the driveway, signed for the envelopes without checking the return address. 10 seconds later, Joyce heard it. A shriek. Furious. Unfiltered. She lawyered up? Are you kidding me? Joyce didn't smile, but she did sit down by her window with a fresh cup of tea, watching the front yard like a woman who knew the trap had been sprung, and that her name was no longer theirs to decide. The courthouse air was stale and cold, like the inside of a forgotten vault. Joyce sat beside Tobias at the polished conference table, her folders stacked neatly, hands folded atop them. Across the room, a clerk shuffled paperwork as a court liaison reviewed the emergency petition line by line. Tobias leaned in slightly. Once the judge signs it, everything connected to the joint account, credit cards, lines of credit, any shared assets, goes into immediate freeze. No transfers, no withdrawals, no excuses. Joyce gave a single nod. Let them feel what stillness feels like. Tobias's petition was airtight. He'd included copies of every stolen transaction Joyce had logged, from salon visits to boutique tech purchases, complete with dates, times, and bank screenshots. But it was the evidence Cassie had provided. Grainy but damning photos of Brittany using Joyce's red debit card at a tanning salon, a boutique, and a liquor store. That tied the theft to intent. Your granddaughter just became our silent witness, Tobias murmured. The court liaison flipped to the affidavit signed by Doreen, a statement detailing overheard conversations, dates of suspicious activity, and notarized proof of utility account tampering. She's sharper than half the IRS agents I used to run with, Joyce said with a smirk. 36 hours later, the order came down. The emergency injunction was granted. Joyce received the confirmation by email at 7:12 a.m., while still in her robe. She opened the bank's fraud report portal and found a new message blinking in her inbox. Investigator, Jennifer Ruiz, assigned. Within minutes, the phone rang. Ruiz's voice was clear and clipped, East Coast accent softened by time. Mrs. Penner, I'm heading up your case. You've documented more than half the work we usually have to dig for. I've already placed a provisional hold on all linked accounts. Anything Brittany and Travis touched, frozen for audit. Joyce let the words settle in. Does that include Brittany's business? Ruiz didn't hesitate. Already flagged. We're verifying if she funneled personal charges through her boutique account. If she did, she's in violation of both fraud statutes and tax misclassification. By noon, Brittany's boutique card was declined mid-checkout at a local craft supply store. The clerk, according to Doreen, who had a friend in that very store, had to quietly ask her if she had another form of payment. She turned red as a summer tomato, Doreen reported, later that day, stopping by Joyce's with a Tupperware of lemon bars. Left the basket, stormed out. Joyce didn't gloat. She wrote it down. January 13th. Boutique card declined. Confirmed. That evening, the silence between the duplex walls was different. Tense, weighted. Joyce sat at her dining table, the lamplight throwing shadows across her open binder. Cassie had texted earlier. They're panicking, but playing it cool. Joyce had simply replied, "Watch, don't engage." Outside, a rumble echoed down the street, deep and mechanical. Headlights crept slowly into the driveway, then flicked off. Joyce moved to the window, a tow truck. Its hazard lights blinked like slow, deliberate winks. Travis burst through the front door in sweats and a wrinkled t-shirt, face pale, phone to his ear. Hey, that's mine," he shouted, sprinting toward the curb. "You can't just take it. I've got work tomorrow." The driver didn't flinch. He handed Travis a clipboard, calm as sunrise. Bank order, missed payments. They pulled the financing. Joyce watched it all through the window, the thin curtain drawn just enough for privacy. The truck groaned as it backed out, Travis standing in the middle of the street like someone who'd misplaced his future. The taillights faded into the fog, dragging what was left of his pride behind them. Joyce turned off the lamp and whispered into the quiet, "Let the freezing begin." The courtroom smelled of old carpet and colder justice. Everything echoed, shoes on tile, coughs swallowed behind hands, the gentle scrape of chairs being pushed back in nervous anticipation. Joyce sat at the plaintiff's table beside Tobias, her red and navy folders stacked neatly before her, the tabs color-coded and bookmarked like a librarian's war chest. Across the aisle, Travis sat slouched in a wrinkled sport coat, jaw set tight. Brittany was beside him, lips pressed into a sour line, dressed like she was headed to brunch, not judgment. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise." Joyce stood slowly, deliberately. Her hands didn't shake. Her gaze didn't waver. The judge, a tall woman with a commanding presence and an unreadable expression, entered and sat without preamble. "This is a motion hearing regarding elder financial abuse. Case number CV1148, the clerk read aloud. Plaintiff, Joyce Penner." The judge looked directly at Joyce. "Mrs. Penner, do you understand why you're here today?" Joyce nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." Tobias rose. "Your Honor, we are submitting exhibits A through F, financial documentation, surveillance photographs, time-stamped transaction reports, and an affidavit from a neighbor with federal investigative background." He passed the documents to the clerk. The judge flipped through them without a word, her eyes skimming numbers, charts, timestamps. And Tobias continued, "My client would like to read a brief personal statement." The judge tilted her head. "Proceed." Joyce stood and opened a single page, typed, double-spaced, printed on thick cream paper. Her voice was clear, measured. "I am Joyce Penner. I am 70 years old. I worked as a school secretary for 38 years. I balance my checkbook every week. I color code my folders. I track my budget to the penny. Last December, I was left alone in a locked SUV outside a pharmacy in 38-degree weather for over 25 minutes. I wasn't confused. I wasn't lost. I was ignored." She paused, let it settle. "Since then, over $2,000 have been spent from my account without my knowledge or permission. I documented every charge. I was told I was forgetful. I remembered everything. They said they were helping me, while transferring funds, skipping utility payments, and trying to have me declared incompetent so they could list my home for rent." She lifted her chin slightly. I didn't retaliate with rage. I responded with records. Travis shifted. This is insane. Silence, the judge snapped, her voice sharp as a gavel strike. You'll have your turn. Joyce didn't even glance at him. I don't want revenge, she finished. I want protection. And I want the truth documented. She sat. The judge closed the folder in front of her and leaned back. Mr. Penner and Mrs. Penner, do you dispute the validity of the financial records submitted? Brittany crossed her arms. She said we could use the card. She signed a single proxy form, Tobias interjected, for one medical payment in April. Not joint access, not asset control. The rest was taken and hidden. The judge nodded slowly. And the surveillance photos? The purchase logs? The declined payments after the accounts were rerouted? Travis looked down. Brittany opened her mouth, then closed it. Behind them, Joyce heard a soft sound, barely audible, a sniffle. She turned her head slightly. Cassie sat in the back row, hoodie pulled tight around her, hands in her lap. Silent tears tracked down her cheeks. She wasn't shaking, she wasn't sobbing, just crying, as if something inside her had finally broken loose. The judge folded her hands. I'm ordering a full financial review, retroactive to the first disputed charge. That includes credit lines, business accounts, and tax records. She glanced at the clerk. Notify the IRS Audit Division. Include a forensic review. Joyce didn't flinch. Brittany's eyes widened. Travis muttered a curse under his breath. The gavel didn't fall yet. The judge only leaned forward, gaze fixed on Travis and Brittany like a blade. From this moment forward, she said, consider your access to this woman's life officially severed. Joyce exhaled. Not relief. Precision. The next move was theirs. But the board belonged to her now. The woman on the phone had a voice like steel wool, raspy, deliberate, and too tired for pleasantries. This is Senior Agent Colleen Hargrove with the IRS Forensic Audit Unit, she said. And Mrs. Penner, I just want to say, you are the most organized plaintiff we've seen all year. Joyce blinked. She was seated at her desk, sunlight spilling across the red notebook and navy ledger that had become her weapons of choice. Beside her, the financial tracker glowed on her phone like a silent witness. Thank you, she replied, steady as stone. I try to be thorough. You're not just thorough. You built a roadmap. Stimulus misallocation, joint account misuse, improper, dependent claims. You even time-stamped gas purchases. There was a pause, then a dry chuckle. You should teach a workshop. Joyce didn't laugh. They thought I was confused. I was documenting Agent Hargrove continued. Now all business. We ran Brittany's boutique account. She funneled stimulus funds, supposed to be tied to business relief, into personal purchases, salon visits, home goods, even a cruise deposit. That's a direct violation of federal aid compliance. And Travis, Joyce asked quietly. He claimed you as a dependent for 2 consecutive years. You weren't on Medicaid. You weren't in assisted care. You weren't even living under his financial support. There was a rustle of papers on the other end. That's fraud, plain and simple. Joyce closed her notebook. What happens next? Charges are being drafted. We're working with the county DA and Tobias Grant's office. You'll receive a full breakdown within the week. As she hung up, the house felt unusually silent. No heater humming, no clock ticking. Just the weight of truth finally echoing through the rooms that had once felt like a trap. Later that evening, Cassie sat on the floor of Joyce's living room, legs crossed, hands fidgeting with the string on her hoodie. Joyce handed her a glass of orange soda, the one thing the girl always accepted without resistance, and sat across from her in the armchair. They're in real trouble, aren't they? Cassie asked, voice barely above a whisper. Joyce nodded slowly. Yes. And it's not just trouble anymore. It's criminal. Cassie stared into the glass. I didn't know. I knew they were taking from you. But I didn't know it was this. Joyce didn't answer with pity. Instead, she leaned forward and held out a folder, her newly updated trust documents, notarized and signed. "There's a clause now," she said. "If anything ever happens to me, you get the savings, only you. Not them, not their debts, just you." Cassie's eyes welled instantly. "Why?" "Because you saw what they didn't. You saw me, and you told the truth." Outside, a car door slammed. Joyce stood, peeking through the curtain. Across the street, a man in a gray suit handed Brittany a heavy white envelope, the kind that didn't come with a smile. Brittany opened it on the sidewalk. Her face twisted as she read. Then her shoulders stiffened, her hand flying to her mouth. From this distance, Joyce couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body: panic, denial, and then rage. Doreen appeared at Joyce's side, seemingly out of nowhere, munching on an apple. "Looks like she got served," she said between bites. Joyce nodded once. "Summons? Felony misappropriation. Federal case. That's not traffic court." Brittany spun in place, whipping out her phone, dialing fast. Travis came out onto the porch, shirt half tucked, hair disheveled. Whatever peace they'd pretended to maintain was unraveling in real time. Joyce turned from the window and sat back down. She picked up her pen and wrote a single sentence in the margin of her red notebook. They wanted control. They're getting court instead. The courthouse was hot, overstuffed with nervous energy and cheap cologne. Travis and Brittany walked in side by side, but the cracks were already showing. His tie was crooked. Her heels clicked too fast. Both of them looked like they'd dressed in anger. Thrown together outfits meant to suggest control, but too frantic to pass inspection. Joyce sat at the front, back straight, lips pressed in a composed line. She wore a soft gray blazer with a pearl pin at the collar, the same one she'd worn to her retirement luncheon a decade ago. Doreen sat behind her with a thermos of tea and a notebook of her own, and Tobias stood tall, calm as ever, flipping through a slim binder of evidence like he already knew how this day would end. Judge Matheson entered without a glance toward the defendants. He dropped into his seat with the kind of weariness only decades of family cases could teach a man. Case CV 1148. Allegations of elder financial exploitation. All parties present? "Yes, Your Honor," Tobias said smoothly. Travis cleared his throat. "We're here. Yeah." The judge didn't look up. "Let's begin." Tobias opened with a short statement. No drama, no theatrics. Just the facts. Improper account access, unauthorized purchases, exploitation of a temporary power of attorney, falsified dependent claims on federal taxes, and repeated personal use of financial assets without consent. "Attached," he said, holding up a single page, "is a chart detailing every transaction in question, cross-referenced with timestamps, witness statements, and photographic evidence." He placed it before the judge, who scanned the page with a raised eyebrow. Joyce didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her work had already been done. Every receipt, every freeze notice, every utility bill had been filed, time-stamped, and certified. Her silence was louder than their excuses. Travis's voice cracked first. "She said we could help. She told us to handle things." Tobias didn't flinch. One-time proxy. No documentation of extended access. No written consent. Brittany's voice followed, higher-pitched and shriller. "She's confused. She's not. Enough," the judge snapped. He turned to Joyce. "Mrs. Penner, do you wish to add anything before I issue a ruling?" She stood slowly. "No, Your Honor. The paper speaks." The judge nodded. "Indeed, it does." He placed both hands on the bench, voice even but hard. "The evidence is overwhelming. I find that Mr. and Mrs. Penner exploited the plaintiff's financial assets for personal gain. The abuse spanned multiple accounts and violated both civil and federal standards." Travis opened his mouth again, but the judge didn't give him the chance. "You are hereby ordered to pay full restitution. Effective immediately, you are permanently removed from all accounts connected to Mrs. Penner, including business entanglements, banking access, and any tax filings involving her name. Failure to comply will result in contempt proceedings. He turned to Brittany. A separate criminal case regarding misuse of federal stimulus funds is already underway. The gavel fell. Joyce's shoulders lowered for the first time in weeks. Not slumped, released. The kind of quiet exhale that comes only when the wolves are finally caged. Outside the courtroom, Travis muttered curses under his breath as he stormed toward the exit. Brittany trailed behind, jaw tight, phone already out as if searching for someone else to blame next. Joyce didn't look after them. She stood in the hallway, sunlight bleeding through the courthouse windows, and allowed herself a single sentence, quiet and certain. "I'm not bitter," she said to no one in particular. "I'm free." Cassie approached a moment later, her steps hesitant but sure. She hugged her books to her chest and glanced toward the doors where her parents had vanished. "They're gonna make this ugly," she said softly. "They already did," Joyce replied. "But now they don't get to keep the stage." Cassie shifted on her feet, then looked up. "Could I move into your side of the duplex? Just for a while?" Joyce paused, surprised, not at the question, but at how much hope sat behind it. And she didn't answer right away, because some yeses are meant to land in the next chapter. The sound of the judge's ruling still echoed in Joyce's bones as she sat in the second-floor clerk's office, signing the restitution agreement with a pen that felt heavier than it should have, not because of the weight, but because of what it symbolized. Across the paper, in bold black ink, were the numbers, every one of them hard-earned. $7,438.12. Full restitution of unauthorized expenditures. $2,130. Back utility payments Travis had failed to make on her behalf. $5,000. Brittany's federal fine for misused tax and stimulus filings, plus court fees and a sealed protective order barring either of them from accessing Joyce's personal or financial information for a minimum of 5 years. Tobias stood behind her, silent until she set the pen down. "It's not revenge," he said. "It's correction." Joyce didn't smile, but her fingers stopped trembling. "I want receipts for every payment," she said. Even the interest. Outside, the air was bright and cold. The fog had lifted. But there was a new chill in town. Not from winter, but from reckoning. Joyce walked slowly down the courthouse steps. Dignity returned inch by inch, with every click of her low-heeled shoes. 3 days later, Travis stood on her porch, holding a plain envelope. No apology, just a sigh as he muttered, "First installment." He didn't wait for a response. She didn't offer one. The next morning, Brittany dropped Cassie off at the sidewalk like she was returning a borrowed item. Cassie rolled her single suitcase behind her and carried a laundry basket full of books. Brittany didn't speak, didn't even look Joyce in the eye, just slammed the car door and peeled off without a wave. Joyce opened the door wide. Cassie hesitated. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," Joyce said simply. "You're a beginning." Cassie stepped inside, the warmth from Joyce's side of the duplex wrapped around her like a quilt. Clean, quiet, safe. A space that hadn't been bought. It had been reclaimed. Later that night, they ate dinner together. Cassie picked at her baked chicken in silence, while Joyce moved at her own pace, unbothered by the clock. Cassie finally looked up. "You ever feel sorry for them?" Joyce took a sip of her tea. "No," she said, "but I do hope they remember the moment it all turned." Cassie didn't ask what moment she meant. She knew. The next afternoon, Doreen appeared with a steaming pie. The top crust perfectly golden, with hand-cut letters formed in flaky pastry. "Justice served." Joyce raised an eyebrow. "Subtle," Doreen grinned, proud as a cat. "Used your old apple recipe and a little bourbon." They sat on the porch with mismatched plates, cutting into the crust like it was victory itself. Cassie joined them, humming softly to music in her headphones, her shoulders visibly relaxed for the first time in months. The wind rustled the dry lawn. A A squirrel darted across the fence. Normal life, finally, unapologetically, resumed. As the sun began to set, Tobias arrived with a folder in hand. No tie this time, just a dark wool coat and the look of someone carrying a new idea. "I've been thinking," he said, offering Joyce the folder. "You've done what most clients never manage. Not just defend yourself, but turn it into something that could help others." Inside the folder was a rough proposal, the Penner Project, a non-profit hotline and resource network for seniors facing financial coercion by family. Joyce read the first paragraph, then again. "I'm retired," she said cautiously. "You're equipped," Tobias countered. "And no one else is doing it here in the Central Valley. You'd have real reach." Cassie glanced up from her phone, eyes lighting up. "Could I help?" she asked. "Like, even with organizing?" Joyce didn't answer right away. She looked toward her duplex. The half that was hers, the warmth she had restored, the walls she had reinforced. Then she looked back at Tobias. "I'm listening." The phone rang 4 minutes after the hotline went live. Joyce had just poured her morning coffee, her fingers still warm from the ceramic mug, when the soft chime echoed through the duplex. She paused, then answered with practiced calm. "Good morning, this is the Penner Project. You're not alone." On the other end, a woman whispered, "I think my grandson's been using my card, but I can't prove it. He says I gave him permission." Joyce didn't rush. "Let's start with your statements," she said gently. "We'll walk through it together." It was the first of dozens. What started as an idea in a manila folder had turned into a fully funded, regionally backed nonprofit based out of a corner office donated by the Visalia Senior Center. A 24-hour hotline, case logging, resource matching, referral partnerships with legal advocates and financial abuse specialists across the Central Valley. Joyce hadn't planned on being the voice people trusted. She simply became it. By week 3, the phones rang every day, mostly women, some men, a few caregivers, and more than once, someone crying so softly it was hard to tell their age or gender, only their fear. Joyce listened, documented, directed, always with that same calm, grounded tone. Across from her at the hotline's small round table sat Doreen, wearing reading glasses on a chain and highlighting sections of an updated compliance handbook. She had taken the title of compliance watchdog with both pride and deadly seriousness. "No calls go unlogged," she reminded their volunteers. "And if someone mentions cash withdrawals with no receipts, you flag it." Cassie, now volunteering part-time after school, had begun speaking at local youth events. At one, she stood in front of a group of nervous high schoolers clutching pamphlets titled "Recognizing Red Flags at Home." "My grandma didn't scream," she told the group. She documented. And because of that, the people who tried to erase her got erased instead. Applause followed, but Joyce, sitting quietly at the back of the room, only nodded. Recognition wasn't what she'd built this for. Still, the world noticed. The Visalia Times-Delta ran a Sunday cover with her photograph beneath the headline, "Senior Survivor Shuts Down Scam and Builds a Lifeline." The article didn't exaggerate. Since the hotline's launch, 4 confirmed cases had been routed to the district attorney's office. 2 had resulted in emergency account freezes. 1 involved a caregiver arrested for forging checks. "Ripple effect," Tobias had said, when he stopped by with a box of donated office supplies. You didn't just win your case, you lit a path. Meanwhile, across town, Brittany's boutique stood hollow. The windows were covered in brown butcher paper, a for lease sign crooked in the front. Rumors circulated of unpaid suppliers, a bad review from a local regulator, and whispers of someone reporting creative tax filings. Travis moved out a week later, seen loading plastic storage bins into the back of a rental pickup. No forwarding address, no goodbye. Joyce didn't mention it aloud, but she made a small note in her red notebook. January 31st. Last known residence change. Travis Penner. Unknown destination. The past didn't need to haunt her. but it needed to stay indexed. That evening, she sat at her desk and opened her living trust. She pulled out the last draft, replaced it with the new one, and smoothed it flat. The new beneficiaries: Cassie Penner, full inheritance of the home and estate, the Penner Project. Equal share of designated retirement funds, Visalia Public Library. Annual donation in Joyce's name for elder literacy programming. She sealed the folder and returned it to the fireproof safe. It wasn't about legacy, it was about placement. Of worth, of trust, of memory. The next morning, while sorting through the week's mail, Joyce spotted it. A pale pink envelope buried beneath the usual flyers and donation requests. Handwritten, no return address. She opened it cautiously. Inside, a single sheet of expensive stationery. Edges scalloped, script carefully looped. "Joyce, can we talk? I think we got off track. I need one more chance." "Brittany." She stared at it for a long time. The paper smelled faintly of jasmine. The lie was already in the scent. Joyce didn't hesitate. She read Brittany's letter once, no more. There was no emotion in her face as her eyes traced the carefully chosen words. Only calculation, quiet and deliberate. The paper trembled slightly between her fingers, not from fear, but from the breeze slipping through the screen door. She stepped into the backyard. The fire pit sat in the center of the patio. A ring of bricks Doreen helped her stack 2 winters ago, long before any of this began. Joyce struck a match, let the flame grow steady, then fed the letter to it. The paper curled, blackened, and disintegrated with barely a hiss. Behind her, Cassie watered the small row of sage and mint they'd planted weeks ago. The soil was damp and fragrant, the hose sputtering as she worked in silence. She didn't ask about the letter. She didn't have to. Joyce walked over, brushing dirt from her palms as she watched the last corner of the note disappear into smoke. "Back to planting," she said. Cassie gave a quiet nod, the kind reserved for people you trust. Inside, the duplex had become something new, not just safer, but hers. Walls once dulled by neglect were now painted a soft buttercream. The furniture had been rearranged to catch the morning light. Doreen had crocheted cushions for the porch chairs. The air carried a hint of lemon oil and lavender, the subtle scent of a home reclaimed. Tobias arrived that afternoon with a leather briefcase and a finalized copy of Joyce's living trust. "Every clause is locked down," he said, spreading the documents across the table. "There's no back door, no legal loophole. You own everything, and the succession plan is airtight." Joyce nodded, signing each page without hesitation. "You did more than protect yourself," he added. "You raised the bar for everyone else trying to." She looked up at him, eyes calm. "I wasn't just fighting for myself." As he packed up, Doreen stepped through the side gate with a thermos of black tea in one hand and a thick folder in the other. She placed both on the table. "Sponsor list for the hotline," she said. 5 new donors and a grant lead out of Fresno. They're watching us now. Joyce flipped through the folder, eyes scanning the logos, each a small victory. None of it had come fast or easy. Every step had been earned, methodically, precisely, the way truth demanded. Cassie returned from the garden and leaned against the doorframe, her sleeves rolled up, arms dusted in soil. "They think you'll change your mind," she said suddenly. Joyce didn't look up from the sponsor sheet. "Let them think." "You don't need to forgive them," Cassie added, almost too softly. Joyce set the folder down. She met her granddaughter's eyes, not with warmth or anger, but something deeper. "I won't." Outside, the late afternoon sun dipped behind the fence line, casting long shadows over the yard. The fire pit had gone cold, only wisps of smoke curling from the ashes. Joyce stepped out to retrieve the metal poker, tapping the edge of the stones, checking the coals like she was inspecting a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. The piece wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself with joy or celebration. It settled in small, deliberate choices. Quiet mornings, locked doors, sealed accounts, a freezer full of her own groceries, paid for with her own money. Nothing flashy, just hers. As the day faded, she moved to the linen closet to store the trust paperwork with the others, a drawer lined with labeled envelopes and printed tabs. She reached into the back, where the oldest files lived. There, tucked between a tax return from 1983 and a savings bond envelope, was something she didn't remember filing. She pulled it out gently. A manila envelope, thin and faded, her name in her husband's handwriting, the kind that had always slanted too far to the right. Joyce, for later. Her heart paused. She hadn't seen his handwriting in over 15 years. She turned it over in her hands, unsealed, untouched, waiting. The flap of the envelope peeled open with the soft resistance of age, like it had been waiting for her touch all these years. Joyce slid the contents out slowly, afraid it might crumble, but the photograph was intact, a slightly faded matte print. It showed her, young and bright-eyed in a yellow summer dress, standing in front of a blue station wagon. Her late husband, George, was beside her, arm around her waist, baby Travis in his arms, and a toy airplane dangling from the boy's hand. They were laughing, all of them, caught mid-breath, mid-life. Joy, back when it felt unshakable. Joyce sat down, hands trembling in a way they hadn't during court hearings, injunctions, or any of the long battles she'd faced. She wasn't grieving, not now. She was remembering, and remembering, she realized, wasn't always soft. Sometimes it cut like ice. She placed the photo in a wood frame and set it beside the engraved plaque that read, "The Penner Project. Founded 2025, for those who won't be silenced again." The two sat together on the mantel, legacy and memory side by side. That afternoon, Cassie burst through the front door with an envelope in her hand and tears in her eyes. Joyce stood slowly, unsure at first if they were tears of joy or something worse. "I got in," Cassie whispered, voice cracking. "UC Davis." With a full ride. Joyce blinked once, then again. A warmth spread through her chest, not the kind that demands cheering or embraces, but the quiet kind. The kind that builds slow and steady, like sunrise after a long, bitter night. They stood in the middle of the living room, the hum of the heater low and steady behind them, and Joyce pulled Cassie into a tight, grounding hug. "You did that," she said softly. "All of it. You chose different." Cassie nodded against her shoulder. "So did you." Later that evening, the hotline dashboard chirped on Joyce's phone. A soft notification. Call 1000 successfully logged. The screen showed a brief summary. A grandmother in Bakersfield reporting suspicious gift card withdrawals. The volunteer had walked her through freezing the card and setting up two-factor authentication. It had taken 11 minutes. 11 minutes to turn fear into action. Joyce tapped the screen, saved the milestone, and then stared at it for a long time. She hadn't built a hotline. She'd built a firewall for people like her, like that caller, like the version of herself that had once waited in a locked SUV in 38-degree weather. She walked to her desk, opened a fresh page in her newest notebook, gold-trimmed and navy-bound, and wrote a single sentence across the top. "Protect first. Forgive if you feel like it." That evening, she and Cassie sat on the porch with mugs of mint tea, watching the dry breeze move through the hedges. The wind had a bite to it, but Joyce didn't shiver. "Not anymore." Cassie glanced over. "Do you ever miss them?" Joyce didn't hesitate. "No. Not even the good parts?" Joyce sipped her tea. "You don't recover by staying warm," she said finally. "You recover by staying smart." Cassie nodded. The truth didn't need embellishment, not anymore. Inside, the house hummed with quiet. The fridge, the wall heater, the soft click of the wind chime outside the kitchen window. Every sound belonged. Every space had been earned back. Joyce stood and walked to her safe. She opened it, placed the finalized estate documents inside, and locked it. Everything was sealed. The house, the trust, the past. No back doors, no second chances. No thaw for those who chose to leave her in the cold. Joyce turned off the light in the hallway and paused to glance once more at the framed photo by the hotline plaque. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but absolute. They left me shivering outside the pharmacy at midnight, so I froze their bank account solid,